Hey guys, I just want to hop on here and give some thoughts about the Ahsoka Season 2 trailer. This trailer looks great. I can't wait for this show. I mean, we get a little of everything in this trailer. We're getting more Anakin, both in Force Ghost and flashbacks. We're getting war, like, traditional kind of big space battles that Star Wars is known for. So we're getting some of that. We're getting, peak Thrawn here. I mean, you got Night Sisters, you got Dathomir. I mean, this is looking really good. This is looking really good. And it's just such a shame that we have to wait until next year for it. Um, but, I mean, this has the vibes. I mean, this is one thing I noticed watching this trailer, especially, is that this show is really giving the vibes of old Legends books. You know, I mean, the scope looks huge. Battles look epic. I mean, this is really giving that energy. And, the one critique that I will, get into, that I do think is valid, is that it is a shame that, that these aren't movies going onto the big screen. Because I do feel like this show is very epic in scope and cinematic and would, benefit from being a movie over a series. Um, and that, this is being done at a time where obviously we can't do Han, Luke, and Leia in any kind of major roles within this. And I think that that is, a bit sad, and a lot of that boils down to the argument over whether or not to recast those three or not. I am a proponent of let's just go ahead and recast them. I think you have the makings of that if the chemistry is right. I think they nailed Han and Lando. I think the guy that they've been pasting de-aged CG deepfake Luke onto, he's got the look. It's just a matter of whether or not, he can carry the role as an actor, which, I mean, I would imagine he probably can. And does he have chemistry with the other actors? And it really only leaves Leia. And most fans are clamoring to have Carrie's daughter, Billy, just take over the role. And I can't say that I hate that. She certainly has the if you ever see anything with her, she certainly can grab that Carrie vibe and attitude. So for me, I'm like, well, just go ahead and recast them at this point. you know but Disney's hesitant to do it, so I'm not gonna belabor that too much. And that's the only other thing that you can really point to is kind of being a shame about this show, is that we don't have Han, Luke, and Leia and Lando playing a big part in this. And I think that that is going to be probably the biggest thing that's going to hang up a certain portion of the fan base on Ahsoka as a TV show. And I think that it creates some pretty weak criticism. Like I said, in the trailer, we do see a lot of that. We are going to get quite a bit of Anakin as Force Ghost and flashback. And, I've seen comments where people, are criticizing that, Anakin is showing up more to Ahsoka than he is Luke. Well, one, we haven't spent a lot of time with Luke, so we don't really know how often Anakin is showing up. But two, I mean, it really goes to show people's ignorance of Legends, because, even off the top of my head, I was going, wait a minute, Anakin doesn't really show up in Legends much. And, and especially not to Luke. And, looking at, just a cursory Google search brought up that really he's only appeared to Luke in Legends canon like a couple of times, and one of the more prominent ones was in issue of the old Marvel comics, and he shows up in a dream. So it's not even like he really shows up even then, even the few times that Anakin does kind of reach out to anybody in Legends canon. It's not even that he shows up as a Force ghost most of the time. It's usually just his voice or in a vision or dream. So, that's really not a valid complaint. Both because of the fact that Luke's only popped up like what, twice now in these new canon shows, and so we wouldn't have time enough to even get a scene or two with him and Anakin interacting. So that's just kind of doesn't really make any sense. But criticisms and stuff aside, I mean, this trailer really teases some really interesting stuff. You know, it's showing us that Thrawn is back and has declared full-on war against the Rebel Alliance and the New Republic. We see that he is, seems to be mounting a lot of things out of Dathomir and has secured even more Night Sisters to his cause, and they're out fighting battles with him. And so that right there makes, things very interesting, you know. We get to see Enoch in action. That looks cool. He has almost like this kind of flaming sword, which is very interesting. We have this flashback where Anakin and Ahsoka are going up against, I don't know if it's a fallen Jedi or, somebody who has been corrupted in some way, with this kind of, dual-bladed Maul style lightsaber, but it separates in the middle to create another beam between the two, creating kind of a middle beam, a third beam there, and that looks interesting. I'm curious to see how that plays out in that battle. Everybody, speculating on who that could be. So, I'm very curious as to, and of course, just curious as to what the deeper meaning of that flashback is going to be. What is it that Ahsoka has run up on that is going to, this flashback is going to inform or reveal. So that's going to be interesting. It does look very much like it seems like Ahsoka and Sabine are maybe trying to end route around Balin to get to whatever he is searching. So that looks like to be kind of the bulk of their quest. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Seems like everything on the other side of the plot of the show is going to really be focused on the war, which is great. I think that's kind of what the show has needed is, that B story that really is a lot of action and war, that really has been missing in a lot of these shows, has been the big grand battles. And so really interested in those and very curious what that's going to set up and where we're going to end at the end of this series, at the end of this season. Because there's still question marks as to whether this is going to lead just into a third season of Ahsoka or if this is going to lead into the long kind of gestating Dave Filoni Heir to the Empire movie and what that's going to really be about. And what that's going to pluck from the show and what that's going to pluck from Legends. Are they going to recast Luke, Han, and Leia and Lando? Are they going to go with those recasting? There's still technically a Lando movie on the back burner with Glover in place still as Lando. So, are we going to maybe see him pop up? Hard telling. With this turning into all-out war, there's part of me that's very skeptical that we won't get some form of Han, Luke, Leia, Lando configuration or direct anything. Because while you can kind of sequester Luke off a bit and be like, well, he's off doing kind of Jedi things, um, the rest of them are still, should be in the mix somewhere if we're talking about a new all-out war. So, that's going to be the big question mark. How are they, and that's really the only real weak spot that I've had with Ahsoka is because of the timeline. I know that they're putting a lot of that heavy lifting on the Rebels crew. And that works to an extent, but as the stakes get bigger and bigger and bigger, and Thrawn's war gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it's going to be a big glaring, gap in here. I mean, where people are going to start asking, where's Han, where's Luke, where's Leia, where's Lando, where are the heroes of the Republic, where are the heroes of the Rebel Alliance? The whole galaxy is back at full-scale war, and the heroes of the Rebel Alliance are nowhere to be found. So that's going to be a real dicey proposition for them to get around unless they recast. And it's not even like you really have to have them take a major role in this specific season 2, but they need to be set up. So whatever way you're going with them, if you are recasting them, and we've seen, based on, Luke at the end of Mando season 2, we've seen that Filoni and his crew are very good at keeping secrets. Like, they're really good at it. So I think that if they have recast those roles, then we're probably not going to know until the series actually drops next year. Because also we got to think about whether or not this is going to feed into anything with Starfighter, because Starfighter also comes out next year. And so we also have to question, are we going to get any setup there? Because there's obviously the biggest of rumors and speculations in Starfighter's Amy Adams' character, and is that potentially Mara Jade, and the child is Luke's child. And so we would have to set the table for that at some point before that movie comes out. And so Ahsoka right now seems like probably the best bet for that setup. And again, it really boils down to not necessarily needing a full-scale story arc, but a basic setup of the character. And it would be very easy to hide that because you already cast Amy Adams. And so if she shows up on the Ahsoka set at any point, it wouldn't really be thought of anything, and could, if a leak came out and said, oh, Amy Adams was seen on set at Ahsoka, it could be very easily played off as, yeah, I was shooting Starfighter and went over for a visit and see what they were cooking over here. So, I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, I think that there's a lot of potential for a lot of really good setup and a lot of really good things to come out of Ahsoka season 2, and I am very curious. And of course, I'm still really hoping that this is setting up them getting into really weird shit with Star Wars. I'm really hoping that the thing that they're pointing that is calling to Balin is Abeloth, because I think that's one area that Star Wars never really got a chance to go into, because of the way that they tossed George's treatments, which were supposed to start getting into a lot of that weird, kind of the weirder stuff within the Force and the kind of micro macro world, symbiotes and things of that nature, and the wills and everything else. But Disney balked at it. So, the idea that, potentially this could be setting up getting more into that kind of weirder aspect, these kind of weird Lovecraftian horrors that exist within, the Star Wars universe that have never really been played out um, in a really meaningful way. I think could be interesting. I think we missed out on that when they scrapped Duel of the Fates with Tor Valum. I think we missed out on a lot of that, really kind of crazy, weird, ancient old ones type stuff that, I mean, Rebels kind of, dipped into that with the Bindu, granted, he wasn't evil, but, or, they kind of dealt with it with the trio, the family, um, the father, the son, and the daughter. And that kind of gets into that kind of old ones, Lovecraftian thing. And, so I think that, if it's setting that up, I think, we could be in for some really interesting stuff going forward in Star Wars. If Ahsoka Season 2 can stick the landing and bring some of that stuff in. So, lots to be excited about. I think this looks great. I think it's got the vibes of the old Legends material. I think this is going to be a really great show. But let me know what you think of the trailers in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.